What we're looking at in this video is how to deal with date formats that are different on different statements, perhaps in your accounting system, or different conventions by country. So what I've run into a lot is there's the date format of like a text string where you would just enter in no date separator, and something like 180421 would be year 2018, April 21st. I personally love this convention because it's kind of like a no muss, no fuss. Everything's going in descending order. But it doesn't really look like a date. You can't interact with it like a date within the Excel workbook. And so our goal is to get a date that looks like this. And the dates that we're going to be converting here are all relevant to the settle date column. So you can kind of ignore the trade date column. This workbook will be used in a later example where we're going to talk a little bit about FX transactions, and I haven't fully fleshed it out yet, but there's enough information here for us just to work with the dates. I'll show you really quick what we have on the City tab is this idea that we have our accounting system, we have our set of full transactions that we know of, and then we have different broker statements for different counterparties. And let's say I didn't explicitly put the different counterparties that go with each transaction in my accounting tab, but what I have here is sections of it kind of reformatted to look entirely different, but they're the same currency combinations, the same dates. So if we look here, this date format is month, day, year with a slash. This looks like a normal date, so the actual result here is going to be the same. And then we have on our JP Morgan statement, things have gotten a little different. Say, for example, our first few entries are not even dates. And so we're going to want to make sure that if we're looking at the settlement date column, that we're able to evaluate entries to kind of be ignored. And then obviously I'm going to get to a header. That doesn't look like a date, so that won't be picked up as a date either. And then here, our format is day, month, year. It's also a single digit month as opposed to 04, so that's also something that can be accommodated. And then lastly, we have UBS, which again, the format we're going to use here is also a text format. So it looks pretty much the same. I think there's no real difference between the accounts tab and the UBS tab in terms of the date format. So I guess one other thing to mention is that when I talk about value date here, that we're sort of using it interchangeably with settlement date on the other tabs. And then if you go to settings, I'm extracting three points of data here that you will need to use the VBA function that I've written to convert the dates. I'm going to need to know which column contains the date to be evaluated. Well, and then also, I guess there's four. So first we have the tab name. Here on the left is the name of the tab that's going to be evaluated. Then the date of the date column, and then the order. So whether it's presenting in the order year, month, day, month, year, you get the point. There's really only so many ways you can do it, and I've given you the three expected conventions there, or permutations, however you want to look at that. You can't just enter anything in these cells, you'll get an error. However, on the next step for separator, you can leave it blank or select none if you are working with a date string that doesn't have a separator. If you're working with a separator, select the appropriate one. And in this case, you could put anything in, and it will totally let you put whatever you in the case that maybe I didn't think of a date separator that exists. So now let's go through, bear with me as I walk through the structure of the sort of what I would think of the supporting code that gets you to the point that you actually get to call on the function that will convert a date. Hit Alt F11 on your keyboard, and if you are following along, you should probably go to thatsobasic.com, go to the advanced video section. I'll go ahead and show you really quick. If you go to VBA for finance, and the whole chicken or the egg thing, obviously I can't make a video and have it already exist on my website, but here you have formatting dates coming soon. By the time you're watching this video, you will have a link where you can download the file that I'm making at this moment. So go ahead and download that if you want to follow along with the file open on your computer. So what I have here is VBA project fx macro date conversion.xlsv. And then I've got mod functions, which contains the function that we're going to go over, and then mod main. Mod main is really just how we're interacting with the workbook. I've declared all my variables public. So this is going to start out, the first thing we're going to look for is against the range tabs, which it's a dynamic range that refers to this specific list. I'm using name manager in such a way that it will pick up all of my new entries, and it will be, I guess I could show you really quick. It's sort of an advanced concept that deserves its own video. But here in my name manager, if I was to show you this, you can see the marching ants right here, and it looks like it's actually offsetting a little bit wrong. So let's put A3, sorry. So if I select into this section, I've got my name range here, and you can see that the marching ants is around the relevant area. If I was to hit close and then go here and type in something like Bank of America, let's say I want to use the abbreviation BAML, and then I go back to my name range, this special little formula here is going to dynamically pick up BAML as the additional entry. And so this has created a range that I can search with VLOOKUP or find to return the existence of a location in my table. And then relative to that location, I'm going to get the settings that goes with that tab. So first I'm going to define the range that I'm going to search, which happens to be the one I just showed you. And then I'm going to loop through each worksheet within my workbook and check if the worksheet name exists on that table. And for the first couple worksheets, I'm not going to get a match because settings, controls, summary tab are all not on the table and not within scope of what we want to look at. So I'm going to just skip through the loop a couple times until I get to a worksheet name that we actually do want to interact with. All right, here we have your accounts, and your accounts is a tab name for which the date column exists in column D. The date order is year, month, day, and it is a string type, so we've entered no separator. Immediately, I'm going to use the offset function to extract the settings. So I end up with column D, order, year, month, day, and separator, none. This indicates how many columns to the right I'm going to move to extract a value. So my found range is here. 1 to the right is the date column, 2 to the right is the date order, and 3 to the right is the separator. So now I'm going to use the with function. So everything after this that includes a dot is going to indicate that I'm interacting with the worksheet that is called your accounts. I'm going to find the last row of this column over here, and it's going to get cleared because the idea is maybe I imported new data, maybe I changed my settings and now I want to clear it. So I no longer have any modified dates here because we're going to rerun it. And then next we have lrow all, which is sort of a wildcard find, looking at all the cells here and trying to say how big is my data set and where's my last row, regardless of whichever column we happen to be looking at. And what we want to look at is the settlement date specifically, and so that's why on the settings tab we had column D being extracted, so that when I look here I can see that in column D I have settlement date. So for each I in .range cells row 2 column 1 to lrow alt, which is 23 column 1, 1 being A, they're interchangeable. So this range right here, I know it's kind of a funky syntax. If you don't like to use this syntax, it's just referring to this range. And I is a range variable that is iterating through that range one cell at a time. So for the first iteration, it's going to start in row 2. So I.row here is going to return the number 2. So we're going to combine row 2 with column D to evaluate D2. And so I'm going to get the date string 180423, and I just called the function date check. I passed in some arguments, date string. I'll show that again. I realize I kind of skipped over that a little too quickly. So we'll show that on the next iteration, what it looked like right before I called this function. So date string got passed in as 180423. The optional separator is blank, and the optional order is year, month, day. So next we're going to evaluate if the date string, actually, first we're going to assign a default value of 0 to date check, because I always think it's a good practice to set some default values in case everything kind of errors out throughout your function, that you have sort of a default fallback value to be assigned. And the idea of the function is that it's not just doing something, it's assigning a value to the name of the function. So the function itself is a variable output. So date check is a date type variable, and it's going to assume a value when we're done with the function. And so date check here, when it assumes the value of 0, 0 is the equivalent of 12 a.m. So we're going to use lots of tips and tricks here working with the concept of dates. So we're going to first evaluate if date string is VB null string or blank. Then we're going to just exit out of the function. So I have exit function here, but it's not blank, so we're going to continue. Next I have on error resume next, so that if things go terribly wrong, it will continue, because we do have our backup value of date check equals 0 to evaluate if everything else is a mess. And sorry, what we just evaluated was if the separator is not equal to VB null string. So if we do have a separator and it's not none, and the order is month, day, year, then what you have is a standard Excel date convention, and there's really no purpose for this function because it would just be overkill. There'd be no reason to do that. An example of that is the city tab, which we'll get to next. But we're going to skip past that because we do not have a standard date. We didn't meet that criteria. So we're going to evaluate it with the other inputs that were provided, like the order of the date. So next, if the date string itself is not blank and skip record is not false, which was from the previous statement, we will erase what we're using to call a date array, and the DT array is going to assume values for year, month, and day. So what happened up here, sorry, I went a little too fast around it. I'm going to pull this back. So we'll say set next statement here. If the separator is blank, or sorry, if it's none or blank, sorry, if it's not equal to none or it's not equal to blank, then we were going to enter an argument that says the separator exists. In our case, the separator does not exist. We are working with a string date. Here we have else if order is not equal to VB null string. So for us to work with a string type date, we absolutely have to have the order of year, month, day, year. And there's a very good reason for this. So if you were to think about using 2-digit day and 2-digit month, and I had something like April 4th, then 0404 is ambiguous as to which one's the month and which one's the day. So Excel couldn't technically figure that one out. Another thing would be pretty much if I have any date and month that's under 12 and under, then Excel wouldn't be able to figure it out either, because I could have 1201 and that could either be January 12th or it could be December 1st. So you can see why there's a certain minimum amount of information to function with here for you to make a valuable analysis. So next, we're going to test the length of the string. The assumption here is to use 2-digit days and 2-digit months. And the reason is if I did 121, I wouldn't know where to separate that if I wasn't including the 0, because 01, if I was doing month day and I have 0112, then I have January 12th. But if I did 1/1/12 and I omitted the 0, I can't tell the difference between November 2nd and January 12th. So the assumption here is for date strings is that the 0 always exists on a single digit day and a single digit month. So that I would always have either an 8-digit string for a 4-digit year or a 6-digit string for a 6-digit year. So next we're going to look at, it's a 6-digit string with a 2-digit year. It uses the order, year, month, day, and then I'm using the mid function, the left function, and the right function. I realize this is a little hard to see. So I'm using the concept that I know the order of the string and I can extract substrings and then connect them with the concatenate as well as the separator dash or slash, and then insert it into the date value function and pass that result into the date check variable, which is the name of our function. And the variable type of our function is a date. And so what I end up here is I go from date string 180423 to having a date value 4/23/2018. A key difference here is that you see 180423 was surrounded by quotes, while 4/23/2018 is not, because the date type variable is not a string. I get to end function, I get to the endif, and I evaluate the result. If it's equivalent of 0, which would have been 12 a.m., then I'm not going to do the value assignment into my sheet, otherwise I will, and here I do have a value assignment, so I'm going to drop it in. So I get 4/23/2018. Okay, I realize that we just went through a lot of explaining with the function. Let's show you what it looks like on the other worksheets by putting a stop break on next worksheet. We're going to hit play, and what's happened is the rest of the dates have been populated here. So I'm next going to go to the city function, and sorry, not function, we're going to go to the city worksheet, and we'll hit F8. We'll go ahead and find its location on the settings tab and return the corresponding date column G, order, month, day, Y, and separator slash. And if you'll recall, when I was going through the function earlier, it has the ability to see what looks like a normal Excel date and not work super hard to figure it out. So when I'm calling this function, I'm simultaneously assigning it to a resulting variable. So result here is also declared as a date type variable, and date check is a date type function. And so I've created the arguments that are going to be passed in. So these variable types are going to get passed into my function and spit out a result and assign it to the variable that's also conveniently called result. As soon as I hit F8, I enter into this function. Then I'm going to take note that I just entered into a separate argument set than I did last time. Last time when I came to this spot, I just skipped to the end of statement and I continued on with checking everything else. Whereas this time it says my separator is missing, or it's indicated as, or sorry, I have a separator. It's not equal to VB null string. It's not equal to none. And the order is month, day, year. This is a standard Excel format if it has a separator, and that's the order of the entries. If you entered in a random separator, you would get an error here, and it would say skip record equals false, and it would try to figure it out with the remaining information that you had input. It would go through the original method of doing all the work of trying to extract a date from it. But otherwise, it's going to, if it didn't get an error, assign that value, and then just go to skip record equals true. And then so here we get out of the function on the next statement. We'll make that assignment. And since that one wasn't very complicated, I'm going to hit play, go to the end of the next worksheet, hit F8. The next worksheet I'm going to look at is JP Morgan. And here I have 4/23/2018 is the output here. If you look at it, the obvious difference here is that the day came first and the month came second. So this is a lot different than our last two. This one was easy to figure out because there was no work to be done. This one looked like a text string. Well, this one could easily be confused. Like if you were to take 3/518, this is really May 3rd, but it looks like March 5th. So Excel actually wants to accept this as a date, but we need to fix it regardless because it's actually backwards. Other countries do their dates a little bit differently sometimes, and this is a great example of that. So go back to your code. You've got your date column is an F, your order is day, month, year. Your separator is the slash. So next, we just cleared that range again, the output range, and we're going to repopulate it. So LRow all, it finds that it goes down to 18. And then we're going to evaluate each entry in column F, starting at the top, moving our way down. Now, keep in mind, our assumption is that the data started here, but whenever we evaluate a blank cell, it's going to come up as 12 a.m. and not be input over here. And so what I'm going to do is, within my date function, I'm going to say, why don't we just put a stop break here, and we'll start to evaluate how the date function works once we get a date check value that's not equal to 0. Go ahead and hit play to get to that point. So now what we're evaluating is this cell. It's not particularly exciting to evaluate the word value date. So we're going to get to the end if the code knows to skip that. And then it's going to actually try to figure this out, but as soon as it gets to an error, it will know not to, well, I'm just going to ask you to trust me because it's not very interesting or intuitive to follow through what it does in that case, but it does come out as 12 a.m., no assignments made, and now we can actually look at something meaningful. Next, we're going to check date string of 23/4/18. And we're almost at the end of the video, so if you're feeling exhausted, hang in there. This part is in my opinion, the most interesting part of this function and what it actually does. So it's clearly not an Excel recognized date. We're going to skip that section. So it's not a blank record, and skip record is not active. So what we're going to do here is we're going to assign every section within the date string to a spot in a 3-position array. So what's going to happen, I'm going to go and zoom in here because I realize that it's hard to see on the video. So this is your string, 23/4/18. So it's going to count until it can get to the first occurrence of your separator. And then it's going to go back 1 character and say, this is your first entry in the date function. And then it's going to remove all of these from the string and then evaluate up to the next section of a separator, and then go back 1, evaluate as the second entry in the date. Then it's going to remove that and then go up to the end, no separators found, and that's the last entry in the date, and that's then recorded in the 3rd position of the array. I'm going to just put that back, but show you this loop here. So it's going to begin like place equals 0, and then do until place equals 2. So the spot is going to be position 3. The separator is the slash, and so the do until here prevents us from just continuing this loop without ever reaching a logical endpoint. And the case is that it's going to interact with knowing where the separator is by having just found it. So if the separator is not there, then it treats it as the last position, which in our case was the year. So we're going to start with the first position, which is the date. And so we're going to say on the left of the date string from the position of the separator -1, extract that character and assign it to position 0. So there's three positions. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me explain that again. So there's three positions in my data array of 0, 1, and 2. Since an array starts at 0, for some reason I was thinking this is so we couldn't get carried away, but logically if we go to view and then you go to my locals window, and then you were to look at my dt underscore array, it first assumes the value 23 in position 0. My date string gets trimmed so that it won't reevaluate the same position again. And then it stores the number 4, which is the month. And then my date string extracts 18 for the year, which is the last position. And my loop ends. So now what I'm going to do is assign the variables year, month, and day to the date array positions for 0, 1, and 2. So now you have 23 for the day, 4 for the month, and 2018 for the year, or really the number 18. Either of them works just the same. Whether it's a 4-digit year or a 2-digit year, it will be able to convert it. And so the way that it knew which position to extract from the array is that it takes the letters D, M, Y, and it says, okay, well, Y was the third letter, so year is the third placement in the array. And so it takes 3 minus 1 is 2, and that brings us to position 2. So remember, everything in an array is off by 1, so you want to subtract 1 to get to the placement of that value in the array. You can decide to start an array at 1 for the sake of following some other counting convention, or you can really define how to start your array. But I went with the default. So now I'm going to use the date value again to take month, put the slash combined with using the ampersand character to concatenate the string together. And then I'm going to add day. I'm going to concatenate that with year. So now I hit F8 and it kind of jumped forward. But if I was to hover over that, I would see 4/23, 2018. Hit F8, get to the end function. I'm going to go ahead and, well, we can leave our stop break there, but then hit play. And if I was to zoom out a bit, I can now see that these dates have popped up. If you want to just use my function, you should be able to step through the code and just see how to extract values from the function, what arguments to pass into it. I definitely wanted to, for your sense of security's sake, to walk you through the function and the logic of how it works so that you trust yourself to use it. But if you got stuck on a couple of those concepts, but you otherwise feel comfortable, feel free to just use the concept of a table like this, pass the arguments into it, and get your dates fixed. And it should give you some really basic ways to be able to compare data from different sources. Because being able to say, check how many trades I have settling on a specific day against multiple brokers requires that I be able to evaluate the dates in the same format. I know that was pretty complicated, and the syntax may not be 100% perfect, so if you have any helpful suggestions, maybe you thought of a really simple way to do this easier, please feel free to share it with me. I'm absolutely open to feedback, and thank you for watching.